The $10,000 cash transaction ban is dead, dead, dead. Martin North, John Adams, in the interest of people. Hello, John.
Hello, sir. Congratulations.
Thank you. You've got something in your hand there. I have something in my hand. We are celebrating.
We are celebrating. We finally got the Parliament and the government to drop the $10,000 cash transaction ban, which happened yesterday. 15 months in the making. It's been quite a journey for us. We were the ones who started this with our first show on the 30th of July, with our first show, ScoMo Declares War on the Australian People. We raised the awareness of this potential legislation, which was to make cash transactions above $10,000 legal, with a penalty of $25,200 and a monetary fine or 2 years jail. And there was a whole host of groups across the country, the Citizens Party, Heisey Says, a whole bunch of other groups, but we were the sort of first, and I think our first show got nearly 90,000 views, and on Walk the World you had about 150,000 views, and so we sort of took the charge, and the other thing I think we did successfully is we did the work. So we looked into the government's arguments, we came up with our own critique, and we put that forward in the Treasury consultation process, and then we engaged in the Senate process. We got a whole bunch of people to make submissions, make phone calls, and then obviously when it came to the Senate inquiry, there was the first round of testimony in November, and then obviously in January I had the opportunity to testify on behalf of the show effectively, and put the case forward and really go through their black economy arguments are basically saying it just doesn't stack up, and so now we were in a state of flux because the government never responded to the Senate inquiry report that came in February. COVID-19 happened, and it's just been sitting there, and Sukkar basically didn't want to concede where things were going to go, but in the last couple of weeks, a couple of things have happened with some media articles, and we got One Nation to force the issue, and basically the Senate on a unanimous basis has spoken.
Yes, and actually interesting, that resolution took about 50 seconds to sort of go right the way through. Amazing, just how quick it happened.
Indeed.
So John, for me, one of the really interesting observations, if I stand back, we could go through the history and replay all the videos, but they're all up there on YouTube. We did a lot, actually. We did a lot of work on this over a long period of time, right? But this is probably the first time that, the social media campaign actually has made substantive change.
Yes. I mean, my view is that this is the first time in Australian history that a YouTube grassroots campaign has stopped federal legislation. So there's been all sorts of campaigns in the past, but the mainstream media were very late to coming towards this. The ABC were started to write some big articles about this whole issue. Their reporting came from our show, from our work. And obviously, I give a lot of credit to Nassim Kadem to raising the issue, and I worked with her and provided her all the documentation, particularly around the IMF and the cashless society and negative interest rates and all of these sort of arguments that we were pushing forward. So we were able to sort of raise that, and obviously we had Aaron Patrick come out with a character assassination campaign, and I actually tweeted this morning, and I've called for Aaron Patrick to resign because he basically tried to demolish us on a frivolous basis in order to help the government to get the legislation through, and that's basically failed. And to my mind, he's a propagandist, and he didn't actually study the issues closely. He just called it conspiracy theory. So it just so happens that when the AFR says it's a conspiracy theory, well, the will of the people basically overrode the will of the establishment, and Parliament has just basically backed what millions of Australians thought was common sense.
Yeah, and I just want to shout out to every single person who made a submission, made a phone call, right, spoke to their MP, spoke to their representations, because this was not just one single point of leverage. This was actually a community uprising, right, to protect our civil liberties.
Yes, and one of the benefits that I saw in this process is quite a few people said to me during this journey, this was the first time they ever spoke to a politician. So they felt no need to call or email a politician. And for some people, they were a little bit nervous about engaging the political process. But once they realised how easy it was to actually pick up the phone, call a politician, or send an email, people have now become more accustomed to it. And now that we can show, because it's important to note, Martin, a lot of people were very sceptical about the ability of a grassroots campaign to stop legislation that the elites want. That's number one. And the other thing I recall when we did our shows last year was that we did, I think, 6 or 7 shows on this one topic, and every show that we did, our views on the show kept on going down. And I remember we had some conversations about how is the audience responding to our commentary on this, and I said it is just so important from civil liberties point of view that we can't go to jail for using legal tender, that even if we, like to my mind, even if we lost the entire audience, if we said these guys are so nutcase, I'm not going to listen to them ever again. For me, I wasn't going to let that one go because it was just so fundamental to what we consider Australia to be.
And I do think it's significant that there were a number of Liberal Party members who also agreed with our position that this actually was eroding civil liberties and actually was completely anti the party's position with regard to civil liberties.
Indeed, and look, we should give some credit to Steve Holland,
absolutely,
who and also Matthew Wilson, who also pushed this in the Victorian Liberal Party, and both of them are viewers of the show. So we got a number of Liberals to listen to our analysis, and they were convinced, and they did their own research, and they saw that what we were saying it stacked up, and that's how they got the Victorian division of the Liberal Party to basically en masse say that they don't support this legislation.
And I think we should also just shout out to people like Nuggets News and some of the other social media channels that also picked it up and then ran with it. I did a number of shows internationally on it as well, so there was quite a lot of interest from other places around the world, because of course this cash ban thing is not just an Australian hatched plot, is it?
No. The important thing in terms of this is there's only one country in the last few years where they attempted this and it got stopped, and that was in Germany, I think in 2016.
Yep.
So I think, to the best of my knowledge, we are the second country in the world where, when government says we're going to place a legal criminal liability on the use of cash, we basically said, no, you're not going to do it, and the people prevailed.
Yes, and just go back over that Black Economy Task Force, driven, of course, by global, economic experts and accountants, quote unquote, right? People who were driving that overall agenda, right? Reducing cash and basically putting more controls in place. And this is a completely opposite outcome to what they intended.
Of course, and a lot of the Treasury, APRA, RBA, all of these people said that our views were redundant. They were quote out of scope. If you recall how Treasury considered some of our arguments.
Yes.
But obviously, people shouldn't be afraid just because you have a title of a bureaucrat or a RBA official. That doesn't give you more intelligence than the common sense of the Australian people. And sometimes when you are in ivory tower, you lose touch with what people think in ordinary life. And this was a classic example where they had a very ridiculous argument. And the reason why it was ridiculous is because they didn't want to admit the truth about what they really wanted to achieve.
Yep.
And then as the truth started to get out and people across the country started to talk about it, people realised that that's not the country they want to live in. And ultimately, Australia should be a bottom-up country where the people drive public policy, not that we are dictated to by a whole bunch of establishment globalist elites.
I suppose it's also worth mentioning, there's a ongoing debate about the future of cash in society, right? And it's part of, COVID-19 and digitalisation, all of those things are there in the background. But I think it's worth reflecting on the fact that there's a different agenda where people might choose not to use cash, right? Rather than suddenly their social liberties are taken away and you can no longer use cash. That's a fundamentally different position.
Yeah. Now, where I just want to sort of just quickly take the conversation. So there was a bit of what I would call pre-celebration last week, and I wasn't ready to celebrate myself. So there was an article in the Australian by Rosie Lewis, and let's actually put this on the screen. And the title of the article was "Controversial $10,000 cash ban legislation quietly shelved." So this article suggested that there was no intention to push this legislation for the rest of the year because there was only 2 weeks of sittings left, but it wasn't completely off the agenda. Now, last week, I think you may have even done a show on Walk the World about this article. The reason why I was not willing to concede defeat or to accept that the government had the government had walked away from this was that, one, it was still on the Senate notice paper, so officially it was still on the government's legislative agenda. Number one, and number two is that there was no definitive statement from the government or from the minister that they had dropped it, and so I had a whole host of phone calls last week, and certain backbench members said that it's dead, it's not going anywhere. But on the other hand, I know that Assistant Treasurer Sukkar told several journalists that it wasn't dead. He still wants it. I know that people in the ALP still want it. And that there was a delay tactic going to 2021 to somehow in terms of reviving it. So that's why I was not willing to, in terms of concede defeats, or to accept victory. Now, coming to this week, I had a whole host of conversations with Senator Roberts and One Nation. Senator Roberts came on this show to basically express his opposition to the legislation. Basically because the mainstream media wasn't covering in terms of the issue. Yep. And so they basically said, well, we're going to flush out what the government's real intention is by pushing this motion, which was 899 on the Senate notice paper yesterday. And just so we can actually inform it, so let's actually put this motion on the screen. So the motion said, that the government business order of the day relating to the currency restrictions on the use of Cash Bill 2019 be discharged from the notice paper. So this was an official motion to say, well, if it's not a part of the government's agenda, take it off the official documentation of the Senate. And so that was an important step because we wanted to flush out what the government's intention was. Because obviously, if the backbench, what they were telling me that this was definitely dead, well, there'd be no reason not to take it off. And so this motion was put forward. Like you said, 50 seconds, it went through. The deal was cut yesterday morning between One Nation and the government, and there was support with the Greens. I should say that the mail I had yesterday morning before the vote was that the ALP were going to vote against the motion. But once they realised that the government was going to support the motion, they put down their opposition. So we'll get back to that point in terms of a second, in terms of what this means. Now, after it passed and was removed from the notice paper, I informed a number of journalists, and we saw yesterday afternoon the Sydney Morning Herald, Shane Wright, to write an article, and I spoke to Shane and I had told him what had happened, and so he's written this article saying that it is, quote, dead, and he has a very specific paragraph in there from Sukkar basically saying now is not the time to impose additional burden on small business. So this is effectively Sukkar now admitting defeat, that he has no support to be able to push this forward. Now, one of the concerns I had was that if Sukkar wanted to bring this back in some form or another, would he be able to? And the message I was getting from a whole host of coalition senators and MPs was, even though that Sukkar still wants this, if he tries it, we will kill him in the party room, because it would have to come back into the party room for another a vote of the backbench. So that's why the minister effectively had to declare he had to surrender last yesterday afternoon. So that's obviously important. So what I think we can conclude is, so we have won in terms of, while the coalition is in government, that this legislation is dead. Now, the only risk I have is if somehow Labor was to win the next election, which is going to be in the second half of next year, there is some possibility, and we can't be definitive that they won't try this, that it may be revived in some form or another. Now, Labor is split on this issue. There are people like the Shadow Assistant Treasurer Stephen Jones, who wants this. So we'll have to see what happens in 2022, but we can be assured between now and 2022, this issue, this legislation is completely off the agenda, and we've had a significant international victory that a lot of other countries have tried, and we're not successful.
Yeah, no, I think it's worth celebrating, and I think it's also interesting if you think about the process here. That Sukkar effectively sort of didn't really recognise directly, but indirectly, right, by saying, "Oh, well, it's COVID, we can't possibly impose on small businesses now." I mean, that's a really interesting way of constructing an argument out of it without actually conceding.
Yes. The interesting thing about COVID-19 is. Some people said to me during the course of the last few days is this legislation is less important because cash is being less accepted by businesses in the economy. But on the other hand, we know from the RBA is since March, there's been over $10 billion of cash that has been physically withdrawn from the banks. Yep. So a lot of Australians are holding physical cash. And obviously now they have the confidence that if they want to use that cash, they legally will be able to use it. So while there are some businesses who won't use cash, there's a lot of physical cash floating around today, more so today than where we were in July of 2019. And so I don't think cash is going away. And obviously we've got a very different environment on monetary policy. And if we go negative, I think, and this was the key argument that I had in my testimony, which is if we went to negative interest rates, the demand for physical cash will go up. And because the argument was, well, cash is being used less, therefore we can, it's the only people who are going to do a $10,000 cash transaction are criminals. I think that's we're going to see a bit of a reversal if we don't see a normalization of monetary policy.
Well, we'll see, I guess, down the track. But, I think we can definitely say we made a difference, right? All of those viewers who reacted and responded to what we said and, helped to make a difference, we've got the right result, right?
Yes.
We have to now go to the next battle and the next battle and the next battle to preserve, the interests of the people.
Indeed. One final thing, so I'm not ready to talk about it in full detail yet, but one thing I will say is the other key battle that we've been fighting over the last year or so is about bail-in. Now, on Monday, the One Nation bill was the Banking Amendment Deposits Bill 2020 was put to the Senate. Now, that went down. But what I can tell you, because this has been made public by Senator Roberts, was there was so this happened on Monday, the vote went down. There was a meeting on Tuesday where some coalition senators, as well as Senator Roberts, had a meeting with Frydenberg's office, as well as some Treasury officials, in which they had a discussion about this issue. And there is a tacit agreement at this stage to come up with some sort of compromise legislation. So not necessarily to endorse Senator Roberts' bill, but they want to do something different. So we will find out next week exactly what is going to be proposed by the government on that front. And addressing the loophole in the legislation appears to be something that the government is looking to address in 2021. There are some additional reforms in this whole area of bail-in, which is because bail-in not only includes deposits but hybrid securities, but also the decision-making process of if there is a financial crisis, who gets to make what decision. So more to come on that. So while Monday seemed to be a bit of a sort of a bad day on that front, there is some movement going forward, and also on the gold front. At the last Senate estimates, I worked with Senator Rennick. We got to put a whole host of important questions to the RBA. We're waiting for responses, and I think we'll have more to say on gold policy and the location of Australia's gold in 2021 as well. But for now, I think the key point is a lot of people didn't think that people using alternative media, social media, YouTube, coming together as Australians could actually impact the business of Parliament. I think we've been able to prove that it can be done. Now, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of hours, a lot of coordination. But if you're focused, if you're organised, the will of the people can prevail. And I think given that's the title of the show, in the interest of the people, I think it's a very fitting way to celebrate 2020.
Absolutely. Well, we should definitely. Well done, John. Congratulations.
Thank you to you too.
And I just want to make the final point that this is all based on analytics, analysis, facts, right? So that really underpinned what we did. And that's a commitment that we can both make to our viewers and listeners that will be continued through the next year, right? Because there are so many other important issues that we've got to tackle to be able to actually drive the interest of the people in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Well done, John.
Cheers, mate.
Martin North, John Adams, in the interest of people. We'll see you next time.